It is exactly 20 after 9 o'clock, and we're now looking at what to expect as the United States and Africa Summit kicks off in Washington. The US aims to boost cooperation with African nations, and Joe Biden is hosting dozens of regional leaders as the second US Africa Leaders Summit this week in Washington, D.C. To unpack this for us is Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations and Director for the Center for Africa China Studies at UJ. And that, of course, is you, Dr. David Monyai. Very good morning to you. Thank you for your time and nice to be talking with you again. Welcome.
Good morning, and to all your listeners.
Okay, so let's look at the summit's focus and the key challenges regarding these talks that are underway right now. And I'm also wondering, is this a bid by Joe Biden to rebuild Washington's relationship with other countries because his predecessor, Donald Trump, had in his approach to foreign policy put America first and neglected these bilateral or these relationships with African countries and other countries?
Oh, yes, indeed. Biden administration has been beefing up relationship not just with attempt with Africa, but even U.S. traditional allies such as Europe, NATO, and other U.S. strategic partners. And Africa has been one area that the Biden administration has developed a strategy, and they're following it up with the U.S. Africa Summit.
Dr. David, I'm just wondering how much of this is not perhaps a bit of concern on the part of the United States, very especially since this summit comes as China, which the United States views as its main global competitor, has consistently outpaced Washington in its investments in Africa. We also know that Russia is trying to rally support on the African continent in response to pressure from the US and its allies over the war in the Ukraine.
The issue here is that the United States should and must operate without demanding or competing with China in the manner in which currently doing. It should put in place investments and speak more with deeds than rhetoric and keep on saying all sorts of things that has nothing to do with the relationship between Africa and U.S. And the reality is that you see a number of these American officials, they fly into African continent, land on an airport built by Chinese, travel to a hotel, the road built by Chinese, a hotel that's been built by the Chinese, and they tell Africans not to do business with China, which is ironic. And I think they just need to boost their investment and really compete, which is good for Africa if all these countries compete. And to reduce prices for infrastructure investments. It will do good to Africa if more and more of products come here at a very competitive price.
Okay, so undoubtedly, I think the US are very definitely concerned because they've gone on to say they actually characterize Chinese lending as predatory and leading to potential debt traps for African nations. They have instead focused on facilitating private investment, but officials acknowledge that the US needs to do more to speed up assistance. Would you agree with that?
It is really hard. The issue of debt trap is hard to tell. China is a new lender on the African continent. And if you look at the lenders, China is not the biggest, however, the first lender in terms of investing more in key and strategic infrastructure on the continent. So the real issue is not about China, all about debt and how debt need to be resolved by all lenders, including the U.S. itself. So that's one area. I think for Africans, it's beyond that. They need to look into the money that American companies, Western companies, that they're not paying tax on the African continent.
Ah.
And Africa is losing a lot of capital inflow getting out of the continent, and we're not getting taxation. So those are key issues that if our leaders could demand on the United States, they help work with Africa, put in laws. Look at the Zondo Commission, you see American companies involved in corruption. So these are real issues. It's nothing to do with China. I mean, China might have its own issues, but it's up to Africans to confront China in their own right without someone supervising that relation.
Look, the Americans are saying that it's way past the time for Africa to have permanent seats at the table in these international organizations and initiatives. Would that then mean that African heads of state would then be able to put pressure and start demanding that taxes be paid by these multinationals? Because Africa could do with that type of revenue. And then on the flip side is the large-scale investment by the Chinese in Africa, dams, infrastructure, railways, etc. What are they getting out of it? Because no one's going to do anything for nothing. What's in it for the Chinese?
Yeah, but it's a question we can ask. What is it for the Japanese? What is it for Americans? What is it for anyone coming on the African trade? It's profit. China is not different from United States or European Union. These are investors. They come to maximize their profit. So the bigger question we need to ask as Africans is that what is it that we want from all these people who are coming on our continent, and what kind of environment policies that we need to put in laws, anti-corruption, conducive environment for trade, infrastructure development of people. We need to ensure that we trade with the free trade agreement that we have signed. We speak with one voice so that we get maximum profit out of all the deals that we get, whether it's Chinese, Americans, or Europeans. But it doesn't really matter. So this idea that a particular country needs to be given preferential treatment, that's where the problem is.
Okay, my final question then to you, because I do know you need to run, you have another appointment. My final question, Dr. David Monye, it's a question and a comment, is clearly because the Americans are very keen to have Africa on board, they want, according to them, Africa to be represented at international organizations, does indicate that we have a lot to offer as the African continent. We are now in a position of power and we can make our demands, and we can then enjoy great bilateral trade agreements and anything and everything else that we need to get us back on track.
We have a long way to go. The recent moves by United States to support Africa on having an extra seat on G20, it's welcome. I think we need support from all other countries in these important institutions. But the core issue and the call by Africans is that the entire post-1945 world order needs to be transformed. It's no longer that world of post-1945. Britain, for instance, India is more powerful than Britain as we speak, even though former colonial masters. So things have to change. Africa needs to have space within the United Nations Security Council where key decisions are made. And at the moment, it's in an undemocratic institution, illegitimate one, and also the nature of involvement. It's not a question of bringing Africans in these institutions if they don't have veto power. So it's a question of quality democratization and normalization of the institutions of global governance involving Africans as equals, not add in kind of an appendix.
Absolutely. Dr. David Monyai, thank you indeed for being on the show. Love listening to your analyses on these matters. Have a wonderful festive, a safe one at that. Take care, and we will obviously be talking lots more in the new year. Go well, and thank you once again.
Thank you.
It is exactly 9:31. News and views right here on Salam Media. Our next guest is way up on in the north of Africa. We are going to be talking to, let's see, a wonderful guest that we have had on this show previously. We're going to be unpacking the Sudanese situation, and we understand that the military of Sudan allegedly is denying the people of Sudan their right to democracy. So let us see if we are able to connect up with Mustafa Mehta. He is a research fellow, head of Africa Desk at MRN, and always a pleasure to talk with him. But we'll be joining him in a minute or two, inshallah.